Very happy to be here this morning. My name is Julian Kulkarni. I'm CMO of Morgan McKinley. But I'm here today to give you a bit of my experience in sort of different types of companies, startups and scale-ups, and sort of my journey. I'm not going to be talking too much about the importance of social media, just trust me, it's important, or raising finance, but more about my personal journey in terms of either starting businesses and helping entrepreneurs grow businesses. So I'm going to give you a few examples of that and a couple of analogies. So hopefully this will be useful and interesting to you, whatever stage of your life you're in as an entrepreneur, intrapreneur, or a member of a team. So hopefully I can add some value in this quick, summarized version of the presentation. So anyway, this is me and an owl which I borrowed earlier. I just wanted to share that with you. And so my background is, I'm a Brit living in Dublin. I'm an entrepreneur, international background, been involved in startups, scale-ups, and also in transformations, which is what I'm doing at the moment. So lots of different types of things. I have raised directly probably about 30 million euros. The first experience I'll come to in a minute, when I was about 26, so going from being an employee suddenly to a company, so a lot of what you were describing a second ago is very relevant. I have, just going to put all that up because I'm conscious of time. Here we go. So I've worked in a few different types of companies. I started off working in an American technology company, localizing their product and launching that across Europe. Then I went into a startup environment in job partners, setting up a startup from the ground up, and grew that to 100 people, and eventually it got sold to Oracle, Taleo and Oracle, so kind of a bit of a journey there. Then I went into an American company, Free Markets, which was launching across Europe, big capitalization, successful in the US, needed to launch, had no presence in Europe, so did that for a while, then worked for a Belgian exhibition company and helped them grow across Europe. And now I'm working for Morgan McKinley, and I'll tell you a bit more about why I'm doing that right now in a minute. Just to keep myself in touch with sort of what's going on in the market, I also advise startups. So I'm working with a company called Trendster. I don't know if any of you have heard of Trendster. It's a brand new company. And it just sort of demonstrates the speed at which things happen at the moment. A guy called Harry McCann called me at Easter with an idea for a company, which he completely changed over the Easter break, launched the company, and built the technology, built the platform, recruited 100 journalists. This is the voice of a new generation. So built that all up across 2 months ago, and now it's got thousands of views, thousands of people visiting it every day as a news source, dipping their foot in terms of raising the first funds, but built a solid technology platform. It just shows the speed at which things can go. So I find that quite interesting. A couple of my experiences I wanted to share with you. Just going to actually jump on here in terms of time. So I wanted to give you my analogies of companies at different stages of their lives. As you get to my age, you try to look at things in terms of the journey you've made. You've got the child, which is the startup, thinks they know everything, needs a lot of help, doesn't quite know their way, full of great ideas, no fear. So no fear at this stage, needs help and structure, but has the ideas and bravery. Then you get to the rebellious teenager, trying to be different, I have a couple of them. I don't know if any of you have children, teenagers, brothers, sisters, whatever, but it's an experience. So I found at that stage, they have different needs. And separately, when you get to the explorer, when you want to go off exploring the world and growing, it's another stage. And then the midlife crisis, which I'll come to in a minute. But they're all different stages of the journey. And let me just go on. So if we talk briefly about the child, so just in terms of a startup, when I started out my first company, Job Partners, we had absolutely no money. We had an idea, which we had no industry experience. We had little technology experience. So what we did at that point is once we'd built a small office in a shed and stopped the leaks in the shed and got some computers from an auction, we sort of set up, and then we thought we need experience, we need people who can guide us, a bit like godparents. So we built an advisory board, and it's amazing. One tip I'd say is it's amazing how many people will help you if you ask, depending on what you're doing. So we got advisors I got someone who'd run a big construction company, nothing to do with the area we were in, but had experience in corporate governance and finance and structure. Also got people from the technology space, people experienced at raising money. So a lot of different types of people. So asking for help and getting help from these people who became our godparent. And we had set up then an advisory board. Even when we were a very young company, it really helped us grow to the next phase. And also another thing I'd say about the company at that stage is when you take people on, your tendency is to bring your friends on board. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it isn't. I've had experiences both ways in terms of that. So it's really to find the right people at this stage of the game and make the right promises to them in terms of what you're going to give them and what you're not going to give them and how things are going to work. It's important to think about this because it can be much more difficult to have those conversations later when they don't work out. So just building that side of things, I think, is really important. So what did I learn at this stage I'm just going to go before you see the teenager. A few bits here. So what do we learn at that stage? Apart from that, of course, keep an eye on cash. What we found is having an advisory board, getting, a lot of them helped us raise finance, helped us be aware of it, but be really careful on what you spend. Communication, even within a small company, is important. Keep your advisors, keep your early investors updated on what you're doing. I've seen many examples of people who don't talk to the people who could help them until it's too late and come with a problem. So keep lines of communication open within your team, keep tight, and also with others. You need to think as you change and you transition technology, don't worry about everything being perfect as such, but make sure it works. So migration's important. I said, really careful about who you bring into the company, and also don't hesitate to let people go from the company if it doesn't make sense. So I really think that's important, and I strongly recommend you to think that way. Personal chemistry matters, especially at the early phases. You're working very closely together. Another thing is, it is, I know these startup culture, when I've experienced 24/7 working, it's important, but if you do that for too long, it takes its toll, and you don't perform at the levels that you should. So, it's easy. A lot of people I know just fuel on caffeine and up all night and stuff. It isn't the solution for the long term. It can work if you've got a great pitch the next day or something, but really, take a bit of time for yourself as well. It really helps when you're doing that. So I'd say that's important. I know. So the next phase, the teenager. So the teenager, in life, you go from needing people to help you stabilize. Now you think you know it all. The world is your oyster. You're a challenger. You're going out there. You're trying to change the world. So I joined a company called Easy Fairs, which was an exhibition company just starting out, and it found all exhibition companies were pretty mundane. There wasn't much, pretty much doing everything the same. Very greedy. So we tried to democratize exhibitions by creating one format for everybody, so that small companies could exhibit next to big ones, and it was free for everybody to come. Launched it from a concept from zero to across 16 countries, 20 million euro revenue within 4 years, and a big journey within that time. But what we got to the stage of 2008, 2009. Suddenly everything was going really well. Suddenly the economy died or stopped for a while, and so we could have just kept going and hoped it'd be okay. But when these things happen, and I'm sure they will again, it's to take a little pause, and we looked at what we had, and we looked at what was good and what was bad about what we had, and we resorted what we have. So we were in all these countries. Some of them we thought we should be in, and some we shouldn't. We cancelled. We got out of some markets. We reviewed what we were doing. We reviewed the way we worked, so we changed our model. And sometimes that's important. I hear now, like Uber, for example, 4 years in or 5 years into their market now, they're looking at driverless cars, so they're reinventing their own model. So I think it's really important at different stages of your life to reinvent what you're at. That's another thing I'd say. So again, looking at the journeys, a couple of lessons learned. So anyway, while we're looking at that for a second, so I think the second stage is looking at the teenager, that kind of company at that stage, and being aware, not be afraid to change things is my message. Really here, and thank you. So I'd just really be open to things. The last couple of things, one is the explorer. So again, I work for another company, which is an American company coming to Europe. And I don't know if any of you are from the US or any of you who are involved in setting up companies in Europe, but one of the things is there's sometimes a misconnection between what Europe looks like and what the US looks like. So coming into the market and really understanding the individual markets and where the most attractive markets are and where the markets are to make the most money. They're not always the same. There are some countries which are much more open to technology than others. So they came into Europe, and we had to evaluate which countries we wanted to go into first. So obviously, if you look at it in terms of GDP or size or anything like that, it's obviously the big 4 or 5 countries. But if you look at it in terms of openness to technology and movement, some of the other countries, like Sweden, even Switzerland to an extent, Netherlands, Belgium to an extent, lots of other countries become very relevant, and so it's important to pick the right countries and then build build from there. So again, it's not always the most obvious countries and the most obvious route which work. With this. Yeah, I think it's important to get solid advice on locations and work with the right partners. And I think also the global versus local is really important. And one of the things working, if any of you are ever in that experience, is to sort of make sure you can get the balance between the corporate and what's needed on the global level, and what works in Germany, what works in Sweden, and understand that and bring them back. It's not changing everything, but it's tweaking it and making it work. So I strongly recommend it. Any of you, and also if you're in Ireland looking to grow your company into Europe, be smart about which countries you go into, be smart about how you go. You can test countries out. You can get agents, partners, you can set up Regis offices, virtual offices, there's lots of ways. Whereas even if you've got a lot of cash because you've raised funds, doesn't necessarily mean you go straight there and open offices everywhere. Just there are other ways of doing it as well, so especially nowadays. So it might take a few attempts, you might get it wrong, have another go. And now the last point, I just want to talk about the midlife crisis. So I joined a company called Morgan McKinley a few years ago. And one of the things was it's a very established, strong recruitment brand. One of the best global footprints. But the markets are changing, and one of the things is that with the internet and with the internet and with LinkedIn, with other things, there's a lot of competition. So we had to redefine what we were as a company, and it's a very exciting journey to go on, because when we did a survey on recruitment, and we found that recruiters next to estate agents and traffic wardens were up there in terms of things. So we found, why is it? A lot of it is about trust and building trust with candidates as well as clients. So we deconstructed what we did from a technology perspective and from a service perspective, and said, let's redo ourselves with the best technology in terms of the data, the online presence, that side of things, and let's look at the service we offer. Let's be consistent. Let's find out what people want. That may seem obvious, but when you've got 400 or 500 people at that stage of your midlife crisis as a company, you have to rethink how you do things and reorganize what you do. So there, it's changing an existing organization. And one of the things I've learned over the last few years is that whatever stage, because when I heard about the opportunity to speak here, one of the things was looking at the startup versus scale up, and I think it's important to not forget the fundamentals. Wherever you are in a business, you should always be rethinking what the next stage is and what you want to do next. If you stay still, then other people will catch up with you and change. So you have to change whatever stage of a business you're in. Whether you're Trendster, which the startup, which was only an idea 2 months ago, they're already questioning their business model, relooking at it, refining it. Or if you're a big established company who needs to tweak and change what they do, same thing. Just keep, what I'd recommend at whatever stage you are in your journey, it's to don't forget the fundamentals. And a couple of sort of tips. A couple of tips here at the end. I want to put up here. So hire well, important. If you get it wrong, or sometimes you don't, it's very important. Fire well. Leave gracefully. So when I say fire, it doesn't mean just fire everybody. It means let's try and end those relationships in the right way. Sometimes you re-recruit people later. So bear that in mind at different stages. Do it gracefully. Hire great managers early. Not too many, but find the right people. Find people who aren't like you, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you're the visionary, the architect, you need people to build. You need people to be out there, reflecting what you're delivering, what you're promising. So make sure, because a lot of times we have a tendency to overpromise. Take time, take stock. That's really important. Think of what you're doing. Too many people can be in the here and now, so make sure you do take time, you take stock. Outsource, really, really important, especially nowadays. It's even more easy. But things that don't, for example, it may be very important to some companies, but things like accountancy, hosting, unless you are an accountancy or hosting company, payroll, just don't bother, just outsource all of that stuff. Later, when you're really big, you can think it makes sense to bring it in-house. Outsource as many non-value add, relatively boring things as you can. It makes a lot of difference. Identify your market strengths and focuses. Figure out what makes you different from other people, not what makes you the same. If you're not as big as others, try and find a weakness with competitors and try and play on that. Identify your market strengths. Communicate effectively internally and externally. Some people do a great job externally because they're out there promoting the brand. They forget the 4 people in their office, and they forget the 5 investors and people. So it really is easy to lose touch with that very small group of people who are the ones who look after you. And I've seen so many times, I even see it now that people don't. So reconnect, building the right advisors, building the right people, building the right team and connecting with them. People help a lot more if you ask them to, and if you talk to them. Don't leave it too late. So I'd say that's very important. And work with experts. There are lots of people out there willing to give their time, advice, and so on. So work with people who know. Ask for help, and you'll get it. And a couple of other things. You set yourselves regular milestones. So if you're looking, it's always good to have that. We're going to be the best in the world at some, and you will. But step by step, I think it's really important to build step by step. Set yourself milestones and celebrate the milestones as well. We were quite good at that when I was doing it, and I think it's very important to do that at each stage. Don't try and beat bigger, better resourced competitors head on. Find a weakness, find a niche, and find something they can't do. There's always a way in, and look. There's plenty. I could talk for hours about this, but I won't today because I think I'll get. So I just wanted to say that little bit of an insight. I hope it was useful not to forget the personal touch and the interaction between your teams when you're growing a business. More than happy to take any questions or talk to any of you afterwards, or here are my details if you want to get in touch. Always happy to hear from people who are looking to grow their businesses. So hope I provided some insight to you into my own journey. And remember, businesses are like children or people, and as they grow, you have to look after them and treat them differently at different stages of life. But never stop learning, never stop changing. So anyway, hopefully that was useful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julian. That was very interesting, having the metaphor with the transition through life from childhood through to teenager. And Trendster, is that genuinely just a few months old? Yeah. Trendster, that company, they only started in April, did you say? Easter, yeah?
No, they only started. Well, they only really started after at the beginning of April. So it really is, and they're quite visible in the media at the moment. You'll see them there on the George Hook show last week and interview with Nora Casey and a few others. So they're very high profile, but they've built that up very, very quickly. And it is just no fear. They've got a team of teenagers building the technology. The guy who set it up is 17. I forgot to mention that. So he's got a team of people. Journalists are there are 9-year-olds writing on this site. But it's the voice of that generation, and it's going really well. But they have no fear, they have no constraints, and they know how to use technology. So yeah.
Right, thanks. So we're going to break now.